We've all been affected by the mid-season slump in Football Manager, where your team starts the season doing really well, then suddenly you get to a congested period in the middle of your season, and suddenly everyone starts playing poorly, it looks like your tactics no longer working, and your season starts to take a downward spiral. So today I'll be trying to help you guys with that by giving you some tips you might not have thought about to help counteract the mid-season slump and stop it being a problem for your team. Hello everyone, Jake here for FMSCOUT. Welcome to the video where, as mentioned, we're going to show you how to avoid the mid-season slump in Football Manager and how to best prepare yourself for those kind of situations so that you avoid your team suddenly playing poorly in the middle of the year. We'll talk about the reasons for it and how to counteract them, but before we do, I'm going to ask you guys, if you do find this guide useful, then go ahead and smash that like button for me. Comment down below if there's anything that you do when you get a mid-season slump, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And the final thing is, you'll see we're managing Porto here. This save comes from a rebuild that I was doing on my own channel, which you can find linked in the description should you want to check it out. A singular video rebuilding Porto across 5 seasons, making only transfers. We've just surpassed 19,500 subs on the channel and we're aiming for 20k, so any support will be massively appreciated. But with that being said, let's get started by thinking about what is the mid-season slump and where does it come from? Well, there's a few reasons for it. You can see one of the key reasons for a mid-season slump is happening for us in February, and that is fixture congestion. If you're managing in England, you'll often see this around January or December, but you can see for us in February as Porto, we were playing a game every 3 days or so, and that was when we had the worst run of form. And fixture congestion does play a huge part in the mid-season slump. We'll talk more about that and how to counteract it in a second, but the other main cause of these mid-season slumps often come from the dynamics section. Now, just so you know, there is a whole article with all of this written up in the description down below if you want to check that out, made by Sheldon Alpha 1 on the FMSCOUT website. We really liked the article and decided to make a video on it, so if you want to learn more about everything we talk about today in more detail and in a written format, you can check that out. But I did mention dynamics can play a big part in the mid-season slump, and whilst we will spend most of the time talking about fixture congestion, I will briefly cover it, because what you'll often see is your team plays well for the first few months of a season maybe, and then suddenly it starts to fall off a few months in. Now, the reason for this can sometimes be that often if there's a player that's going to be upset at your club, whether it's someone wanting a new deal as you can see here, or sometimes it's a player who thinks he should be getting more playing time, not getting it, it's usually a few months into your season when they'll come forward and give you these complaints, which in turn lowers their morale. It might lower the morale of any players that agree with them, makes players unhappy, and dynamics plays such a huge part in Football Manager that if a few of your players are unhappy, you'll be conceding more, you'll be scoring less, and you won't be winning as many games. So always keep your eye on the dynamics section and make sure that you're keeping everybody happy. If you don't know already, you can get on top of these issues before players come forward and ask for new deals here. Just so you know, I haven't managed poorly here. This is because I was simulating for the rebuild, which is why we've got so many unhappy players. I wasn't hands-on managing. But if you were, like you guys will be on most occasions, and you want to stop these players ever talking about wanting a new deal or wanting more game time, go to the happiness section. Here you can keep an eye on players and see when issues might be about to arise. As you can see, Diogo Leite here has a dissatisfied opinion at the club, starting to feel he deserves a new contract. Right now, that isn't a huge issue, but eventually if we leave that for too long, it will become a concern for the player. He'll be unhappy and it'll be another unhappy player in the list. So always keep an eye on this page, maybe once every couple of weeks in the FM world, just to see if there's any issues arising in your squad so that you can stop them before it becomes an issue. But yes, most of the time, if there's going to be these issues, they'll kick in a few months into the season once that player realises he's not getting the game time or the contract that he thinks he deserves, and that is when you can often see a mid-season slump. So just keep an eye on your dynamics, make sure everyone's happy, and that is one way to avoid a mid-season slump. But even if you did all of that right, sometimes you will still get one, and I'm not saying everything that I showed today will prevent it from ever happening, but so often a few seasons in, as your fixtures start to become more congested, your team starts to play poorly and you start to wonder why. You start tweaking the tactic to try and sort things out, and often this causes more issues than what you had in the first place. Tweaking the tactics too much, changing roles, suddenly the players don't know the tactic and you start playing poorly, and this isn't the best way to counteract it. The best way to counteract the slump is to get ahead of the curve and stop it happening. Now right now we're only in July, so it's the start of a season here with our Porto team, and our players' conditions are high, they're not too tired, they're not fatigued, they're all fresh and ready to go. But if you're midway through a season, you'll see if you hover over this heart on each player, they'll all have a different situation, whether it's that they're very fatigued, some players might be more susceptible to injury based on what's going on in the season, some people might have a really high match load, some people might have a lot of match sharpness, others might not, and it's something that you should definitely keep an eye on. Make sure you're not playing these players that are too tired. Of course, most people won't be doing that, but often it can be very hard to avoid. Now, if you're in a blessed situation like Guardiola at Man City, where you can change your first 11 completely every single game, let's say, with the players you've got and have no issue, then that's awesome. But in most cases, if you've got 2 or 3 games a week, most of us won't have a squad where we can just substitute our whole 11 for another 11 and play equally as well. Often that will require us playing our worst players and then losing more matches, and it's not really the situation you want to be in. So obviously rotation is a big part of managing a player's fitness, but there's other ways around this if you don't want to have to rotate your full team. So when you've got a smaller squad, if you want to avoid that slump, you need to be monitoring your player's condition as often as possible. And there's a few ways that we can do this, and some ways that people do that actually might not be the best way to go about it. So I'll start off with the basics, and that's to head over to the training section and go to this section here called rest. This is a very handy section that allows you to track players' intensities of training, check out what the physio recommends they should be training at, look at their injury risks, their sharpness, and also the part that we're going to start with that's very useful. It's these 5 bars up here which allow you to set a different intensity for training based on a player's conditioning. So if a player has this level of conditioning, very poor, all the way up to the base level of poor conditioning, they'll be doing no pitch or gym work. Steps it up for half intensity if they're a little bit more fit, a bit more fit than that, they're on normal intensity, and it's on normal intensity throughout there. And these are the basics that the game has set. You might want to tweak this and have, say, double intensity when a player is fully fit. Maybe you don't see the point in going on half intensity and you want to have no pitch or gym work. All of these things are up to you. But what this will do is take into account your player's condition and automatically set their training intensity. But what you might not know is that most players won't actually be using these 5 different rest categories that you've set if you haven't set their training intensity to automatic. If you have someone set to normal intensity, you'll see it doesn't have this circle next to the intensity level, and that means that Otavio is always going to be on normal intensity. He's not going to follow the guidelines that we've set, and obviously we don't want that to be the case on most occasions, so we're going to click automatic, and therefore because he's got green conditioning, he goes to double intensity. So make sure if you want all of your players to follow these predefined instructions that you highlight them all and then set them to automatic. You'll then see the circular emblem next to their intensity level, and that means they are working to the intensities that you've set. So obviously that's a good thing to do in general. Make sure that you've tweaked the intensities to be the way that you like them. You might want to change this throughout the season. If you're in pre-season mode, let's say, maybe you want to go double intensity here and here to make sure these players are training at the highest level. Maybe when you get to the congested period of your season, you might want to knock that down to double intensity, maybe go to half intensity at this level. Whatever you want to try, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on these things throughout the season to make sure your team are training in the way that you want them to be. At a basic level, this is something that's definitely going to help your team and manage their conditioning, but there's actually a few more things you can do to step up the efficiency of what we're doing here. And one thing that a lot of people will do after a match that they think might be a good idea, but maybe isn't so much, is rest days. Now, if I go to our training and then go to our training calendar here, and we boost it forward a few months, once we're midway through the season, let's say, you can see what the team is doing on most occasions is having a rest day after each match. So we're playing Cassiopeia here on the Sunday, and then the Monday we are resting in 2 of our sessions and recovering in the other one. And that might make sense, right? Particularly when you're playing 1 game a week and you don't want to tweak things too much. Most of the time this is going to be perfectly fine for you. But if we're playing on a Sunday and we also have a match, say, on the Wednesday, there's really not going to be much time to rest, and your players aren't going to be able to properly prepare for the match that's coming up. So there's a few ways that we can tweak this to make it more efficient. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have these rest days. I'm just saying there might be a better way to do it, because what a rest day will do, if you give that to your team, is it gives everyone a rest, quite clearly, right? People aren't going to training, they won't be preparing for the next match, but that can sometimes be pointless, particularly if on that Sunday match against Cassiopeia, let's say, if we played our best 11 there and we're going to play a rotation side on Wednesday, then what's the point of giving that rotation side a rest? Because those players haven't played on the Sunday, they're still fully fit. Why give them a rest day when they could be preparing for the next game game, and that is when, particularly when the fixtures get congested, you can get really into detail with monitoring your player's condition and really benefit yourself when it comes to avoiding that mid-season slump, because what you can do instead of giving the whole team a rest day is pick out individuals once a match is done, literally as soon as a match is done, go to training, go to rest. Here you can tweak the individual intensities of those players that have just played the match on the Sunday. As opposed to giving the whole team a rest day, we can just focus on their training intensities to sort them out. And often these players will have a physio recommendation attached to them. If it's a day after the game, the physio will recommend what kind of intensity they want. Obviously, we're in pre-season here, so the recommendation is double intensity, actually increasing the intensity on our players. But if this was in a fixture congested period and our players had just played a match, you'll likely see something here that says physio recommendation, no pitch or gym work, or maybe even half intensity. And what we're going to do is take these players off of automatic if they've got the physio recommendation and switch it to whatever the physio recommends. Let's imagine that says the physio is recommending half intensity for our players. We'll give them half intensity. That way, someone like Diogo Costa, who might have played our game on the Sunday, he's getting rest, but at the same time, the players that didn't play at the weekend aren't having to have a full rest day of no training. Instead, everyone can keep training, and only these specific players can ease up on their individual intensities. And you'll keep this up, checking it every day, adjusting the intensity until you eventually see the physio recommendation disappear. The player will be at the condition level that he needs to be at. Once the physio recommendation disappears, you want to go back to automatic intensity. That way your player will have the same preset standards that everybody else does. Again, you'll see the circle on them now. That means they're following the automatic instructions regarding rest days. But by doing this, we were able to give the players that needed a rest whilst also not making our backup players who didn't even play at the weekend have a rest day that wasn't needed. They can keep training for the matches. And by doing this and using your physio's recommendations and monitoring your players, you can keep your players at the highest condition possible, playing at a top level, being fit on a more regular basis, getting less injuries. Combine that with making sure that the dynamics are staying well within your club, and before you know it, there'll be no such thing as a mid-season slump. In all honesty, I never really looked at the rest section too much, and now that I have, I'll definitely at least set my presets up here to be the way that I want them. Let's say I have double intensity when the condition is fully green, and I'll make sure that everybody is set to automatic as well, because a lot of the time I would have assumed whatever I set up here would have been the case for every player. But clearly, as you can see, when it's not set to the automatic circle, they're not going to be following our preset instructions, and it's something that I didn't know personally before reading the article, or at least something that I didn't actively focus on. Now I certainly will. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you found this useful, smash the like button if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.